I'm going to tell you, it's been a long time since Laurie Lickley joined us on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. But then there wasn't any legislating for a few months, and then all of a sudden there was quite a lot of legislating this week going on in Boise. It is 6 minutes after 9 o'clock, and of course the representative represents parts of Twin Falls County and Jerome County. And we're at 50. Representative,
Clean your glasses there.
it's the trifocals. That's the problem. It's which part of them do you look through? It's 56. We'll call it. It's good. It's nice. We'll just put it at that. Anyway, welcome back.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Bill, for having me this morning. It's been a long week, and I'm happy to be home and sleep in my own bed and get up this morning and again, talk more legislation and public policy.
Yeah, I want to point out, too, by the way, telephone number if you'd like to reach the representative, 208-736-0300. And you can also drop us a line by the app. If you've got the app on your phone, you can drop us a short text as well and get in touch with us that way. Bill Colley with you until 10 a.m. on Magic Valley this morning. So you were one of the 3 votes out of, I think, 4 local representatives who voted no, actually, against ending the emergency. And I think Lance was the one who voted yes. You and Clark Kaufman, who your seatmate, voted no. Linda Hartgen voted no. But overwhelmingly, it passed in the House. Of course, in the Senate, they did what do you call it? A resolution that just doesn't mean anything. Just basically say we'd like to see it come to an end. So the question then comes up from a lot of people. You put an explanation up on Facebook. I want to mention that. And
Absolutely, I made it. I want my vote to be made perfectly clear and the reasons why.
And so you put up the Facebook post, which I shared on my Facebook.
Oh, thank you.
And I thought it was going to get a lot of heavy criticism. I should point out, for some reason, it didn't.
Huh.
So maybe my Facebook friends are actually nicer than I thought. But what was your rationale?
Well, it was pretty complex, but at the end of the day, House concurrent resolution under Article 4, Section 9 of Idaho's Constitution was not legal. It was unconstitutional and was not legal. And I think that if we were to pull those emergency disaster declarations out, the long-term implications would have been disastrous for Idaho. Primarily because of the matching money that we get. Now we could spend 10 days talking about the federal side of things, but quite frankly, when we have an emergency in Idaho, it is nice to know that those hard-earned tax dollars actually come back into Idaho. And we've still got a lot of open cases on emergency disaster declarations, including some flood designations right here in the Magic Valley. Oftentimes, those are on a receipt type of basis, and it takes some time to process. And had that emergency declaration just immediately been pulled, we would not have got those matching monies back into those communities that really need it. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the matching money during a disaster declaration, and we can talk again, kind of looking at the southern coastline right now, Texas and Louisiana getting hit by Hurricane Laura, and what those emergency disaster declarations now. And again, we can talk about coronavirus, but getting those monies back into these communities to repair what needs to be fixed, or to provide the health and the PPE equipment that our hospitals need during this situation, or whatever it might be, to put the roads and bridges back in under an earthquake. We have got to, be able to access that money at a match so that it doesn't cost the state of Idaho or bankrupt the state of Idaho or our local communities. So for that reason, and for the reason that it was unconstitutional and not legal, was the reason I voted no. Now I can tell you, the voices were really loud. By gosh, you need to. And I'm like, I could have. They were. I mean, and I'm still getting messages, hate mail, and that's fine. I mean, I understand that this is part of the job. I could have very well just, hit the button, knowing that it would get stopped, but I thought, no, this is the reason why, and I'm going to stand up and say that you elected me. The folks that are listening on the other end today, they elected me to uphold the Idaho and the United States Constitution, and I take that job extremely seriously.
Most people, I think, I've had some people comment about this to me. They're aware that while we're in this disaster or this emergency declaration for COVID, we are getting money from the federal government. When that ends, that money, that pipeline dries up.
That is true. That is true. However, it could take some time for those receipts to come back in and for those federal matching dollars to come back. And that's why if you ended it right now and cut it all off, some of the folks in the state of Idaho haven't submitted those receipts, and therefore that matching money would not be back.
I wanted to point out, if people want to get in touch with you, they can do it, of course, on the program, but as well, you're available off air too.
I am. I am readily available. I'm very active on social media. You can find it, like my Facebook page at Likely for Idaho. Follow me on Twitter, Likely at ID, and give me a call. 420-7975. Shoot me a text, give me a call. And I can tell you that while I heard from a loud group, I also heard from a very quiet group. I heard from my senior centers, I heard from my city folks, I heard from my county folks, I heard from my small business people. I heard from my churches too. And so at the end of the day, some of the decisions I made were not necessarily from the loudest voice, but they were from a group of folks that maybe aren't always loud saying, thank you, or this is what I prefer you to do. And I know it's not very popular because you're hearing, I want you to vote, I want you to support this. So, it's a balancing act. Making a public policy bill it's sausage making, and I think it sometimes the complexity of it is a lot grander than the quick sound bites you read on social media, and I encourage people to reach out, and I'm certainly willing to have good civil conversations with just about anybody.
We've got a caller. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air with State Representative Laurie Lickley on KLIX.
I guess the thing that upsets me is that we're in stage 4, and he won't let us out of stage 4. And you restaurants, beauty salons, and everybody else that's suffering is still suffering through this crock. And so, yeah, there's extenuating circumstances. You're right. But unless I'm mistaken, and that's possible, then I was hoping that by removing the emergency declaration, we'd get out of stage 4 and release the entire state. But I didn't know if that would work with like Ada County and the city of Boise. I mean, how many businesses are we going to lose inside the city of Boise? And nobody cares. We care about COVID numbers. Testing is up. The death rate is down. And that's the truth. And I bet I know as much about it as anybody. And I'm just sick of this crap. We're going to be freed up. I mean, Kristi Noem didn't do any of this. And she's going to run for president in 2024. And Brad Little may be put out to pasture where he belongs. I'll hang up.
So, Bill, I'm not sure. Was there a question in there? First of all, thank you, and you're not alone. And this entire process has been less than perfect, and I am the first to admit it. When all of this came down in March, as our good President Trump made the emergency disaster declaration, and then our good governor also made a similar declaration for the state of Idaho. None of us really knew what was going to happen, and I think we've learned a lot in this process, and it's evolving, and we're learning a lot more in it, and it's painful, and I hate to see my small businesses suffering. I feel badly that that some of our churches, that some are deemed essential and some are not, and I think if you look at the Senate resolution that was passed, we recognize that everybody that goes to work every day is considered essential. Whatever you do, our churches are essential, and we're, if we had to do this all over again, maybe we would have done it differently. When I was reffing basketball, I get done and I think, oh, geez, I did miss a call, or I had a parent chew my ass. Then I was a parent, and then I was a coach. And so, looking at it from all of those different angles, it is. We should have maybe done things differently. And you brought up South Dakota. So let's talk about South Dakota. Idaho's unemployment right now is at about 5%. We're third in the nation. So we're rebounding more quickly than actually the state of South Dakota. And quite frankly, I admire the governor of South Dakota. We have a lot in common. We're both ranching families and so forth. So I admire her. I would welcome a chance to sit on a horse and carry the American flag as well. So God bless her, and and the state of South Dakota. What I will tell you is that the population of South Dakota hovers around 800,000. The population in Idaho is hovering about 1.7. My guess is we could be bumping up against 1.8 million. So we've got at least 2 times the population of the state of South Dakota. And while she didn't shut it down, their economy is not recovering nearly as quickly as the economy in Idaho. And I'll also tell you that they had a House member in their legislative branch in South Dakota actually die of coronavirus, who was about my age. And I'm not going to tell you what that is on air. And they've also had a couple Senate members get sanctioned. And so they really haven't had an opportunity. They don't want to call themselves back in or be called back in to allocate some of the CARES money because they could be sanctioned. I mean, they've got a whole different ball, so yes, it's pretty impressive, and she is an impressive lady, and by golly, I look forward to meeting her one day. But I also think that we've got to compare apples to apples, and Idaho is positioned to rebound better than any other state. Our economic momentum is, again, we're leading the nation. We are the least regulated state in the nation. And while, you may not like the governor, this has not been easy. And I'm not sure that, I would have wanted his seat in the beginning of this because it was a lose-lose situation. But we are going to come out of this because of what the legislatures of the past have done and protected us economically. We are going to come out of this better than any other state. But we can't continue to get frustrated. Let's find a solution. Let's work together to find out how we rebound, how we put our small businesses back, how we get our consumers where they want to go back into the restaurants, while still protecting our long-term care facilities and those that are vulnerable. We've got to come forward with solutions. We're resilient in Idaho, and I think we're going to do better together if we sit down, come forward with solutions that work, and move Idaho forward so that we rebound together and that we can all get everybody back to work and really get through this coronavirus. It's easy to get angry. I've been mad. I've cried. I've pounded my fist on the table. But I'll tell you, too, that this has been very personal for us and my family. And so, science is changing the data, the information, and everybody has access to instantaneous information, and oftentimes information for information versus information for affirmation. And so the ability to transmit information, even misinformation, happens so quickly anymore that sometimes it's the complexity of everything. I would love to sit down for coffee with just about anybody. I mean, if you're going to treat me rudely and be disrespectful, I'm not going to bother, and I've got more pressing time. But let's sit down and have a cup of coffee and talk about the issues and the complexities, and I am certainly willing to listen, and I do listen. I do listen.
We're going to get to a break, but before we do, Dan, the cookie man from Jerome, I know Dan as well, but Dan says, although I don't always agree with Laurie, she does her homework and can back it up with the Constitution, and he thinks you're doing a good job. So that's your first positive of the morning. We've got more coming up with State Representative Laurie Lickley in just a moment. It's coming up on 20 minutes after 9 o'clock, and we'll take some more of your questions and comments. It is 59. As soon as I say that, it drops to 57.
That's okay. We're heading into fall.
Yes, wind is going the other way, and we've got more of your comments and questions, as I mentioned, on the way. So please stick around, and we're going to actually talk to her about this personal experience too with coronavirus, because most of us have not had that. It did happen in her family, and she can share some thoughts about that as well. State Representative Laurie Lickley joining us on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Coming up on 9:23, it is 57. Bill Cowley as well, and the telephone number 208-736-0300. You can also reach us via the app, and we'll get to one of the app responses in a moment, but we've had a caller who's been trying to get through the last several minutes. Caller, you're on the air with Representative Lickley on KLIX.
Good morning. Interesting to me with all the data that we can find outside of the alphabet media. So as an example, we can go back and look at congressional record and the CARES Act. Okay, the CARES Act was passed January 2019, not 2020, 2019. So the death rate in Idaho from suicide and related items from the government or the governor, the little king, shutting down the economy will be higher than the people who died of COVID. Now, I'm not saying there's not a COVID virus. We're all gonna hear the story in a bit from Mrs. Lickley about COVID. I'm not saying the virus isn't real. What I'm saying is the king has control and the king won't let loose. And there are people in government, in the legislature, who will support the governor no matter what he does till hell itself freezes over. It doesn't make them right. It's interesting what is constitutional in the Senate or the House and what is not constitutional.
Okay, on that note,
And
the show does end at 10 o'clock, and we do want to have the guest actually get an opportunity to respond to some of these comments.
Well, and again, thank you for those, and you're not alone in some of those thoughts, and I can tell you that I hope you all have a chance to go in and read the Senate resolution that was passed, kind of very similar to what the House concurrent resolution would have done had it been constitutional and legal. We would like to see an end to this executive session, but there is a process and a procedure in place to do that. And we have got to put to the voters a constitutional amendment to be able to have the legislature call itself back into session to address some of these situations. We go back, a good number of decades where the legislature over the years put the ability to call the legislature back into the executive branch of government. Is that right? No, it's not. And so let's fix that. But we can't fix that now. We have got to go through the proper procedures and the protocols to get that done. And that will be addressed when we look at, when we start the regular session in January. We're also going to look at, making certain that if indeed there's a trigger number for federal dollars coming into the state of Idaho for appropriation. And so, at the end of the day, I hear you. I hear you loud and clear, and you make some very valid points. But you've also got to recognize that we are working under a constitution and a set of statutes and legal opinions and a process that was put into place. You don't know that your roof is going to leak until you have that 100-year storm that puts it to the test. Guess what? We had that 100-year storm this year. The process has not been perfect, and I admittedly recognize that, and things could have been done differently. But I will tell you that our good governor has spent many hours with the president and the vice president, and he invites them back to Washington, D.C. because of the way we've handled it. Now, I can tell you that we're also watching our healthcare capacity. We're watching our long-term care facilities, and we have done a good job. And the reason that we're not overloaded right now is because we have taken those precautions. And so I encourage y'all to have I'm an imperfect person in an imperfect world, being loyal to the dear man above and my constituents and the Constitution and my family, and really trying to make the best decisions I can with the information that we have at hand. And I just ask for a little bit of patience and some empathy in this whole process because, we will make some changes. There are some holes. There are some holes that need to be brought back to the voters. There are some new laws that need to be passed, and we will take a good hard look at those next session.
Now, Lyle, if you're still with us, no, he's not. I was going to ask him if he had a direct question. When we get by the statements, I'm kind of curious if people have any direct questions. We've got a caller, about 2 minutes to go before the break. And caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Good morning, Representative, and good morning, Bill. Hey, I was a little disheartened to hear that you voted no, but after you explained the constitutionality of it, I respect that, and I really respect that you understand Idaho's constitution, and that's why you did it. And I believe that you have a very good heart, and your intents are great. What I am a little worried about is shortly after you gave that explanation, which in my opinion is all you needed, you started speaking politician, reaching out to the federal tax dollars and the teat of the government. And that does concern me a little bit. I mean, you as a representative, I'm sure you know your job, and you're very passionate about it. And I think, like I said, you're good-hearted. That listening to that constituency and sticking to the Constitution of Idaho, in my opinion, should be your only concern. Don't let that hole of corruption and politics seep its way into you. I think you're a better person than that.
Well, we've got to get to a break, and then you can respond to that afterward. Just a couple of quick notes. One on the negative side, just a listener from Jerome, somebody you know, then I'm sure, but that's the handle on the app function says when Laurie referred to Brad Little as a good governor, that told me all I need to know about her. And then Charlie Howell drops a line, and Charlie says, on a positive note, Charlie says Laurie's comparison of South Dakota to Idaho is supported by good information, and it's okay to disagree, but make changes without mob rule instead of following the current rules. So there you go. There's somebody else weighing in as well from Jerome. A lot of people listening in Jerome this morning.
Good.
You must be from there. We've got more on the way. It is
Go Tigers, go Vikings.
It's coming up at 9:30. It is 58. State Representative Laurie Lickley joining us this morning. Bill Colley as well on Magic Valley this morning. State Representative Laurie Lickley joining us this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. Bill Colley juggling the telephones and app messages too as well on Magic Valley this morning. We are up almost to 60. I don't think we're going to break it before the
Just
end
wait
of
a
the
second, it'll drop to 59.
Yes, it will. And it's coming up on 9:34. So we had a caller who called a few minutes ago, and his what wasn't a question, but his point was he respects that you followed the Constitution as you saw it, but he objects to people taking, I guess, federal government money.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that was part of the argument I used in my nay vote. I mean, we pay our taxes every March, and I hate to pay my taxes. I do. I think that our businesses and our people know how best to spend their money. I really do. And yet we have to write that check every March. And it goes to the federal government, to the Internal Revenue Service. And so it's nice to know that, if we do have an emergency disaster declaration, that some of that money comes back in. And, we can argue, quite frankly, when the whole CARES thing got assigned to the states, I took some opposition to that. I don't like to see this federal debt just kind of rolling and rolling and rolling. And so, again, I think that's going to take a much longer conversation. We have the parameters that we have now, and if I talk like a politician, I'm sorry. I've spent 30 years trying to understand how to work with my local communities and work with people inside of the government structure and the small businesses and the industries and the organizations. And, I'm really trying to do the best job I can. And, if I refer to the good governor on the floor, we refer to our colleagues as the good gentleman, the good lady, the good gentleman on the second floor. And so I'm sorry that's just how we have been trained to speak cordially to each other. And again, the good gentleman on the second floor, the good lady from 31, the good lady from 26, the good lady from 24, the good gentleman from. So, yeah, I'm going to probably talk the lingo, because if I want the respect of my colleagues and some of those agencies, I'm going to have to treat them with respect as well.
I told you before we got on air that before the governor made this declaration, that when it came to deregulation, he was probably at that point the finest governor in the country with what he was doing. He's been invited to the White House to talk about this and been featured as a guest. However, this is where I have an argument with this, is that when he made the declaration, his intent may have been good, but it's a little bit like someone trying to put up a fire break. So you set a backfire to stop the big fire, right? But your backfire burns down the town. You're still going to have to pay some cost for that. And I think politically, it's going to be very difficult for him going forward, because so many business people were impacted in such a negative way. And when they lost, in one case, I talked to a business person who basically lost the yearly lease cost of her business through all of this while she was shut down for a couple of months. These are people who are not going to come back and get on his bandwagon.
Yeah, and I certainly respect that and understand that. And again, as I stated earlier to the listeners and to you, Bill, this has been an imperfect process. It really has. And you compare us to some of those other states and those small businesses, we're going to see some attrition, and it's sad and it's painful. And we're also gonna see, the consumer confidence. They've had to change. Many people have had to change their business models because of what has happened, because they want their consumers back under these certain guidelines. And then we're dealing with a virus that nobody, that we're trying to understand. And I wish there was a simple answer. And I understand the backfire agreement, and I sympathize with our small businesses. We're a ranching family. We watch the supply side of our industry fall out and the markets get volatile and so forth. But I also think that there's going to be some opportunities moving forward. You know, with our unemployment rate hovering around 5%, there's opportunities, and I ache for our churches, and I ache for our small businesses that have had some challenges during this. And I've kept you in my prayers, and I've tried to come forward with solutions, and working with the right people to do that. And it's that, and I'm going to be very, I'll let you. I have got people that don't like the good governor. And I mean, we're hearing from them today, and yet they're in the Trump camp. I'm in the Trump camp too. But our good governor followed the lead of the president of the United States. And so he's getting beat up for working with the administration at the federal level. We're loving the president. I love the president. I loved following some of the RNC and the great spokespeople, and looking forward to getting him reelected in November. But some of the arguments for me don't make complete sense, and then they make sense. And so, you know, I love Trump. I like the governor. Let's have additional conversations. It's just as simple as that.
We got a time, I think, to squeeze. Well, I've only got about 45
We haven't
seconds.
talked coronavirus yet with my son either.
Yeah, we haven't. I've only got about 45 seconds before the break, and judging by the calls this morning, no one can get anything in under 4 minutes. So what we'll do is we'll go to the break in just a moment, and then we'll pick up with a story about your son, and then we'll take some phone calls near the end of the hour. We're coming up though on a break at 9:40, and do want to mention, of course, the Rush Limbaugh program is scheduled following the news at 10 o'clock this morning. State Representative Laurie Lickley is joining us in the studio, and of course, this is a follow-up to the special session that just concluded at the State House in Boise, which, despite what mainstream media says about all the crowd rushing in and shattering glass and the like, they always try to give the impression that Idaho is a perpetually Ruby Ridge. It probably wasn't quite as bad as it was portrayed in mainstream media. But we've got more on the way in just a couple of minutes. Bill Colley as well on Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX. State Representative Laurie Lickley joining us in studio this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And we'll get to some of the comments and questions again in just a moment. But we did want to mention, in fact, I've been planning to have the representative by for the last couple of months because I told a doctor a couple of years ago, I said, I don't think I've had the flu since I was in high school. That was in the 1970s. He said, no, you've had the flu, you just didn't know it. And I read some paperwork the other day that said 70% of people who probably were exposed to COVID or contracted it did not know they had it. The numbers have gone up from about 40, 45% to 70 now. So for most people, it has actually been something that's been very, very mild. And we hear, of course, for the older folks, it's going to be worse and the like. By the way, Bill Colley with you, too, on Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX. It's 9:45 and it's 59. But not everybody on the younger side has dealt with this and just brushed it off. And your family had one of these situations.
We did. Ironically enough, once we adjourned Sunny Die on March 20th, I get home, and we're still trying to navigate what things look like. And our son told us he was going to get tested for coronavirus. And, it's just like anything over his childhood. I was like, oh, whatever, okay, fine, but you don't have it, and you'll be fine. And so he had to go to Sun Valley to get tested, and so they asked him what his symptoms were, and they told him. And anyway, it ended up being 14 days before he got his test results back, and he tested positive. And so I was shocked. I was like, oh, I didn't see this coming. And so, it allowed me the opportunity to say, and of course, I was tied up with a session when he probably had it at its severity. And I said, so was it like the flu? And he said, no, Mom. He says, I have we've all had the flu. And he said, no, it was different. And the longer term implications that came with it for him included the lack of taste, the lack of smell, and some reduced lung capacity. He's 6'4", 23 years old, good solid strapping kid. And it took about 90 days for his taste to return. I didn't feed him any good beef in that 90 days, nor any good coffee. And then his sense of smell is almost back now. And what are we, about 150 days post positive test? And his lung capacity is back. He finally has got his lung capacity back, but it's taken that long to get it back where he feels like he could hike and climb and move irrigation water and so forth. And so for us it's kind of been a little bit real. I've got a girlfriend that has had it and was in and out of the hospital and is still on oxygen, and she too, this was in March. And so, you know, I just, is it as severe as they thought it was? I can't answer that. We're finding studies and science and everything is evolving on this coronavirus. And so, for us, it was personal. We had to quarantine. I talked to this South Central Health District, the contact tracer. They didn't know what they were doing. I was quite frankly a little. I probably knew more than they did, and I was just nice, just asking questions about, well, will he have immunity? Just do we need to get tested? As the family members, they didn't live in the same home as we did, but we interacted with them. Do we need to get tested and so forth? And nobody really knew. And quite frankly, I don't think anybody still kind of knows. And I think we're going to find that maybe we did overreact just a little bit. But we're given the circumstances now, and we learn from this, but we got to go on.
Uh, any idea where he would have contracted it?
Well, and yes, he had been in both Florida and Chicago, in the months ahead of that. However, he had been in Sun Valley 2 weeks ahead of when he got sick, and more than likely that is where he picked it up.
Because Blaine County really got hammered.
They were the hot spot. They were the hot spot in the beginning, yes.
We've got a caller looking to join us, and well, if I can get the phone to work. There you go. Caller, you're up next. You're on KLIX with State Representative Laurie Lickley at 947. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question to the representative. Laurie, will you support legislation to limit the governor's powers to close businesses in the future without due process and just compensation? Thank you.
That's a great question. And again, I point you to Senate resolution. Yeah, we are going to look at legislation that will, look at the ability to call the legislature back into session. We're going to look at, the ability to, spend some of those federal monies. Absolutely. I will certainly take a look at it. And I think it's got merit. And again, I'm going to have to look at the constitutionality and the legality of the legislation. But you bet, if it comes within those guidelines, it'll certainly have my support.
In fact, there's a similar note I have from a writer in Jerome who asks, I expect every business filing for bankruptcy in the state to have access to all federal funds.
And they have through PPP. They've also had access to, they've had some access to the CARES money through the state of Idaho. There has been federal money available to them. And if they've not applied for it, shoot me a message or I can put you in contact with getting access to some of that information.
And when the governor signed the bill yesterday on liability, as I understand it, of course, originally the way the bill was talked about, it was going to be directed at schools and government offices because people still have to go into government offices. But it was expanded to cover businesses that might face liability as well. And he didn't have an issue with that expansion of the bill.
Well, and currently the governor and others are already have immunity from something like that. We pulled that out of there, and we added in our small businesses, we added in our schools, we added in our churches, and other charter schools and things like that. So they will be protected. There is a time certain. This will expire at the end of the fiscal year. On July 1st of next year, so that if it needs adjusted in the regular session, we can certainly look at it. And this is solely specific to coronavirus. gross negligence is still going to come under the parameters of liability. So this is solely related to coronavirus, and again has a sunset date of July of next year. Our ranching communities, our ag industries, our small businesses, our churches, our schools in the Magic Valley wanted this, and it had my support.
We have another caller. And caller, you're up next. You're on the air at 9:50 on KLIX.
My question goes to a part of the resolution that talks about mental health of people. I work in the mental health industry. I work for a service provider who goes out and we go around and we help people and stuff like that. And some of our people are in assisted living. Now, our people in assisted living have been on lockdown since the beginning, and by mid-September, it'll be 6 months since we haven't been able to see them, and all we can do is call them on the phone. Now, my question is this, is why didn't the resolution extend to the health districts?
And again, that's something you bring up a very valid point, and that is something that will be looked at in the next legislative session. It is certainly something that is a concern, and it too will be included in something next legislative session. I can tell you, you talk about the health and the mental health side of things. I was appointed by the governor to serve on the Behavioral Health Council, and we were supposed to start meeting back in April to really kind of come forward with a plan to address mental health in the state of Idaho between the judicial, the executive, and the legislative branch. I think we can create some efficiencies and really kind of address Idaho's mental health problems and substance abuse problems. And again, it would be nice if we could just quickly solve all of these things. It just doesn't quite happen like that. But you bring up a very, very valid point. We want you to be able to get in and see your loved ones when they need you the most.
I got a question really more of a comment that came in from a writer in Burley, and who says, and I heard this in fact from many people in government too, that the individual hopes or wishes that perhaps the governor could have actually consulted a few more people in government and even some constituents, because I know a lot of people in government who told me this, and maybe they won't say it on the air, but I could make a list out, who said that they were completely caught off guard by the announcement, and that perhaps if they'd been included in some discussions beforehand, it might have gone a little bit more easily than it did.
So, and quite frankly, I think he surrounded himself with the best experts possible. He talked to the legislature each and every week. We, met as a House and a Senate with him, and then then as a House and then as a
But
Senate.
before he made the
Oh,
announcement,
the declaration, the disaster declaration. Absolutely. I didn't know it was coming. We were still in session at the time. I think there was just a lot of unknowns. And again, he's admittedly said this has not been perfect. And maybe next time he will reach out to a few more, of his constituents across the state of Idaho. Absolutely. I mean, again, we're imperfect people trying to do the best job we have with the information that we have. And I want somebody that's going to step up and guide us through this. And we can all play, as we talked about the coach and the referee and the parent, we can all look at it from different angles, and we're going to continue to do that. And I just encourage you to let's be part of the solution. We got to move forward. We can learn from what has happened, but we've got to make the best decisions moving forward. And we hope that the mistakes that maybe were made will not get made again.
We'll squeeze in one last caller. We've only got about three and a half minutes. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air with State Representative Laurie Lickley.
Who's the representative?
Laurie Lickley, go ahead.
Okay, the governor, he talks about cleaning up the forest. Is he going to do that with private companies, or is he going to have the government workers do that?
That's a really great question. And thank you for moving us away from coronavirus and, special sessions and all of that. Idaho is fortunate to kind of be participating in what we call the Good Neighbor Authority, giving our Idaho Department of Lands the ability to harvest a lot of that diseased timber and that timber on Forest Service lands right now. I'd love to be able to see it extended and more acres brought in. It's currently under litigation by by some of our environmental activists and organizations, but we're still being able to harvest some of that timber. You've got a great, that is something we in Idaho are really looking at, and I will continue to push for, some additional state, federal work together to make sure that we're processing and harvesting that, those natural resources to, log it, graze it, or watch it burn. And, I really, if you know who I am, it's my roots, my families, and my communities, ag, natural resources, and water. I mean, and our families and our communities are going to be at the base of every single decision I make on your behalf in the state legislature.
We only got about 2 minutes to go. So in the last couple of minutes, bringing this up, his topic, we talked a little bit earlier about President Trump. I'd like to think that we've gotten a better relationship with Forest Service and BLM and all of these other agencies after the transition in 2017 than we had before.
And that's why we need 4 more years. I agree wholeheartedly. And you look at some of the changes that are happening, and specifically with like the Bureau of Land Management, and the Forest Service, in my opinion, still probably about a decade behind where they are with the Bureau of Land Management. There is that collaborative willingness to work and look at some of the, I don't care whether it's NEPA, FLIPMA, the Endangered Species Act. We can go through and talk about all of those. I think we've got the ability to make some changes right now, and I would like 4 more years to make some of those incremental changes that are based on good, solid data, so that in 4 years, whoever may be elected doesn't have the ability to come over and just turn the switch off with another executive order. Let's put some programs in place that work for our logging and our timber mills and our ranching families and our multiple users across the state of Idaho. We've got the ability to do it, but we need 4 more years to get her done.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm at that point now where having every summer to breathe in the forest from 4 different states for a good portion of the summer is getting a little old. And if we can find some way to get around that and maybe have some clean lungs to breathe with during the entire summer, it'd be a great thing.
Absolutely. I completely agree, and I think we need that 4 more years to kind of address some of those additional issues.
And we need to point out, too, you don't have any opposition in November.
I do not. I have no opposition in the general election. My name will still be on the ballot, and I encourage everybody to, either order your absentee ballot, or we just, made certain that you will have the ability to vote in person. Show up. I think that is a privilege and a right, and women actually are celebrating 100 years of the passage and the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Of course, Idaho, just because we're Idaho, we were 4 years ahead of that, giving women the right to vote. But get out. It is. It's a right and a privilege, and you will have that right to exercise your vote in person or get your absentee ballot ordered today.
We want to thank State Representative Laurie Lickley for dropping by today. Coming up on 9:58, we've got a break, and God willing, in the Creek Don't Rise, I'll be back here Monday morning between 6 and 10 a.m. We've broke 60. It's 62.